welcome to our show tonight, Polygamy, What Love Is This? I'm your host, Doris Hanson. We want to thank you for inviting us into your homes tonight. This is a live broadcast from Salt Lake City, Utah, and a telephone call-in program. Our phone number is 801-973-TV20, 801-973-8820. We do invite you to call in a little later with your questions or your comments about our subject. And if you would prefer to email your questions, your comments, you can send your emails to tv@aboutpolygamy.com. And we do have a delayed broadcast that is shown in the Boise, Idaho, Nampa area on Sunday afternoons from 4 until 5 p.m. And you can watch that on KCLP Channel 18 in the Boise, Nampa area. And live streaming video allows viewers from around the globe to watch our show. They just need to go to our website, whatloveisthis.tv, to watch us live. And also all of our shows can be watched and rewatched on streaming video from our website, whatloveisthis.tv. You can check out our website for information about our ministry to polygamists. Our website is shieldandrefuge.org. If you're in a polygamy group, we'd love to talk to you. We do have a toll-free hotline. The number is 877-425-9993. And if we accomplish nothing else from doing this weekly television show, we want to accomplish this. We want to succeed in communicating to polygamists all over that polygamy is not requirement from God for celestial glory. That when your polygamous teachers, beginning with Joseph Smith and on down to whoever's teaching you that today, they claim it's a biblical principle, we can prove beyond any shadow of any doubt that God has not commanded nor condoned polygamy. You don't have to do it. Jesus Christ alone is the Savior, and He doesn't need any help from anybody for anything. And through our Shield and Refuge ministry, we offer you hope, we offer you a support system, and non-judgmental help. In fact, we do have a support group. We meet monthly. It's called Life After Polygamy, and our next meeting is April 25th. That's a Monday evening at 6:30. And if you're in a polygamy group, or if you've been in one, we'd love to have you join us and just come once and see what it's like. We invite people from all of the polygamy groups in the area. And if you would like more information, just give us a call and we'll be happy to tell it to you. Grab a friend and come on down to our meeting. We do heartily recommend that people from polygamy groups or from even the LDS church, if you're leaving that religion, you need to have a system of support around you. And there is an ex-Mormon support group that's meeting day after tomorrow, that's Saturday on the 9th. And if you're interested in going to that, you can call telephone number 801-708-4865, or you can go to the internet and type in www.meetup.com and just look for ex-Mormon support group and you'll find it and get the information that you need to go to that. But we do recommend that you go to a support group when you leave your cultural religion. Now for tonight, we want to talk about the FLDS court case going on in Canada. I'm doing good tonight already. Beginning in November of 2010 in British Columbia, Canada, they've been hearing evidence to determine if their laws against polygamy are in violation of the Canada's Charter of Rights. Now, their Charter of Rights is like our Constitution or our Bill of Rights. And since November, they've been hearing a myriad of arguments from both sides of the issue that's been presented to help them determine this question. The testimonies are being heard. They're almost completed. The closing arguments have almost been completed. There's been thousands of pages of transcripts recorded, and soon we're going to be waiting on the court's decision whether or not polygamy should or should not be a right of choice for Canadians. The decision, once it goes to the court, to the judge, it could be weeks or even months in coming. But this is a very significant point in history, and some very interesting and heart-rending evidence has been presented to the Canadian court. So we thought it would be an interest of our viewers to know what took place, what was given as evidence in Canada, and so we've set aside tonight's show to cover some of these issues. We certainly won't be able to cover everything, but we're going to give it a good try. Now, I've invited our guest, John Llewellyn, to come and share what he's learned about this. He's been on the show several times before. He's got a lot of expertise in this subject. And so we want to welcome him again to the show tonight to help us as we discuss the court case going on in Canada. Thanks for coming.
It's my pleasure.
And there is a website that we both have gone to several times and would like our viewers to know that they can go to. It is stoppolygamyincanada.wordpress.com. You can go to that website daily and get updates on what's going on in the Canadian case, and almost everything that we're going to be talking about tonight probably is on that website somewhere. You found that to be a very good site for you.
All you'd have to do is just Google Stop Polygamy in Canada, or Google the name of some of the principles in there, like Blackmore and Euler, and there's just a ton of information up there.
Yeah. And it's all real good information, too.
It's absolutely good.
And the last time you were here, you were talking about this reference case. In fact, you said that you were going to present an affidavit to the court, and that you would come back and share what happened if you went up. But you didn't go up, but you're here anyway.
No, what they did is they invited a lot of the anti-polygamous people and a lot of academics to submit affidavits, and I was one of them. And at that time, I thought that would be testifying, but they only required those affidavits which were challenged by the opposition had to testify, and mine was not challenged. So as much as I would like to have been there, I couldn't afford to stay as long as all the testimony was. I did save some money, but thanks to the director of Stop Polygamy in Canada, Nancy Maresca, she has been furnishing a lot of us, you and I and other people, almost daily what was going on. And then she did sit in on a lot of the testimony.
She did. In fact, several times a day sometimes she would send information of what was going on.
She did a fantastic job.
She's done a lot of work on this.
That's right. And she was able to find a lot of attorneys to represent the state or the attorney general who's opposing it, and those organizations which oppose it pro bono. So there's been an awful lot of voluntary work, just like you do here, in combating this terrible social situation, as we well know because we've lived it. And we know firsthand.
And so we owe Nancy Maresca a great big thank you, Nancy, when you watch the show. Well, we're going to take 6 points tonight on the issues going on up there. One of them is, the first point we want to talk about is what precipitated the court case. The second point will be, what was this court case supposed to achieve? What evidence was presented for the pro-polygamy side, and what was presented against the polygamy side? And then the most interesting of all is number 5, which is what interesting information came out during the testimony, and then finally the question, what's next? So let's go with the first one. What was it that precipitated the court case? Why did Canada all of a sudden decide they wanted to decide whether this was...
Well, back in January of 2009, the Canadian law enforcement decided to arrest Winston Blackmore and James Euler, 2 prominent polygamists in the community of Bountiful or thereabouts. And they charged him with bigamy, which is something that doesn't occur here in Utah very often.
Right.
But the cases were thrown out on a technicality. So as a result of that, the Attorney General in British Columbia asked the courts to hear testimony on both sides whether or not the polygamy statute, I'll call it a statute, should be decriminalized. And of course we know here in the United States, especially in Utah, there's a movement to decriminalize polygamy here. So what happens up there is going to definitely have an impact upon us here in Utah and the United States and Texas. But I think it's, even though there's a liberal climate right now throughout the United States, and some of the ominous people supporting the decriminalization up there, the evidence seems to me to be overwhelmingly to keep the statute in place.
As it is. In fact, one of the articles I read that most Canadians are against any changes.
They are. There's, I printed this out. I don't know if it would be worthwhile reading, but Chief Justice Robert Bauman of the British Columbia Supreme Court must decide whether having multiple conjugal partners is so inherently harmful to individuals and society, it overrides an individual's right to act on sincerely held beliefs, the right to liberty and freedom of association. And of course, this phrase here, sincerely held beliefs, has been used in the courts throughout Utah and around here, and I really have a problem with that, because is it really a sincerely held religious belief? I don't want to get off the subject, but if you study the driving force, which is section 132 of the Doctrine and Covenants, if you read that, it's mostly secular. It appeals to the secular, the worldly part of the religion, rather than a spiritual aspect. I would say that it's 90% worldly and maybe 10% spiritual.
The only, or 1% spiritual, because the only reason God was brought into it, because that's the only way Joseph Smith thought he could get by with doing it.
That's right.
Out in the open. He still didn't do it out in the open for a long, long time. When they started or decided in November, I have this article where they said the real issue is not ancient patriarchal practice that treats women as chattels and sexual collectibles, but whether the British Columbia Supreme Court will uphold their sections that is barring polygamy. Polygamy comes to us from the Dark Ages. There's no equality of women with men. There is ample evidence that the practice harms women and children, reduces women to second-class citizens. It's more than past time that it was dumped into the garbage can of history. This is 2010 AD, not 2010 BC.
Right.
And that's I think is a very good point. And that was a remark made as they went into this discussion.
They've listed several reasons why the statute should remain, the abuse of children and different things. But one item I noticed that they missed, and that is that polygamy creates an unequal distribution of women. And that in and of itself, to me, is enough to prohibit it.
Well, I've always talked on this show, the arithmetic's against polygamy any way you look at it.
That's right.
It's against.
That's right.
And when we think of the harms to women and young girls, but what about the harms to the young boys who grow up, they know they'll never get a wife. They can't get a wife.
And then there's another victim that the media seems to overlook, and that is the first wife, the monogamous wife, and especially those that are converted into the different groups. They don't realize how tough it is on that woman.
It is. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It is. I've seen that. Oh my. All right. The second point. What is it supposed to achieve in the end? When it's all said and done, what is the purpose to achieve this court case?
Well, what they want to do is try and decide if the statute is constitutional. And of course, the FLDS and the people on that side claim that it violates their religious freedom, and it boils down to religious freedom. Well, my gosh, all you have to do is take Christ and attach it to any type of action and call it religious freedom, you know? And that's essentially what they're doing, you know? If they want to worship a yellow dog, you know, that's fine. But if the religious belief has a detrimental effect upon other individuals in society, then it should be declared prohibited.
That's exactly right.
And that's what they're trying to determine now.
The British Columbia Civil Liberties Association said that keeping the statute invites the government to inspect the bedrooms, the kitchens, and the living rooms of consenting adults. It denies privacy that's available to couples and monogamous families. Individuals should be free to make the life choices they wish, so long as those choices do not harm others and are made with informed consent. Now, this is a Civil Liberties Association. When was the last time that you saw the government go into the bedrooms and the kitchens and the living rooms of the polygamous families? That doesn't happen.
Yeah. As you know, I'm a retired Salt Lake County deputy, and I specialize in sex crimes. And for a number of years, I was the only one that was investigating the polygamy cases. And that's one of the arguments that law enforcement use as an excuse not to get involved, because it's a can of worms. And that is that we don't want to be put in a position where we have to peek in women's bedrooms. But, you know, there's many ways that you can build a case without doing that. And one of them, another drawback, is that you have to have a witness. You need to be able to corroborate. And it was really tough in obtaining a witness who would testify to an actual marriage or the cohabitation. And that was the biggest problem. But nowadays, with the publicity that's coming, there's more and more people that are leaving these different groups, including the FLDS, one of the most compact of all groups. And they are willing to testify. But in Utah, that testimony doesn't seem to count much.
Well, no, it doesn't.
I was really proud of Carolyn Jessup, and we all know who she is, and she wrote the book Escape. It was a bestseller. And she was one of the few women who successfully was able to come out of the FLDS.
With all but one of her children.
Right. And she testified up there. And then I noticed that there was a young man named Euler. I forget his first name, but he left the Bountiful group, and he was able to testify. And between those two people testifying, according to the affidavits that I saw, my gosh, I don't know how the judge can do anything else but just...
and they weren't the only ones, but they were very powerful testimonies.
Right, they were very powerful. And I noticed that, and I'm not sure that I'm correct on this, because, you know, being so far away, but most of the affidavits which were challenged came from academia, scholars. There was a number of scholars who had studied it. And of course, this is all clinical stuff. But I was surprised, well, they probably thought they could intimidate Carolyn. But none of the other people, like Rena and Mary Mackert, who've raised in it, I had lived it, none of those people who had firsthand knowledge, it seems, were challenged. And I think for a good reason.
Yeah,
it's because they had the
it's their story. How can they talk against their story?
That's right.
So what was presented as I mean, you kind of just covered that now. But what were there? I know there were some testimony from people that are anonymous testimonies from people within the group who said polygamy was their life. They loved it. They wouldn't live it any other way. And so, what kind of testimony was that?
Well, you could go to Iran and find a few women there, in Afghanistan, living under conditions even more horrible than a lot of our polygamous women, who would probably say the same thing. It's almost a masochistic type of a testimony, if you know what I mean. That they want somebody to, well, they enjoy being in slavery, I guess, because they don't have to bear any responsibility. Principal Voices, for example, here in Utah, these are women who were the favorite wives. Some of them weren't even living polygamy.
Right.
They never had to go on welfare. They always had plenty of money. They dominated their husband. I know two of them personally. But to go down and get the secondary women and the children and ask them how they feel about polygamy, it's another thing.
Yeah, and one good thing I can say about this is that it has given us the opportunity, whether you're pro-polygamy or not pro-polygamy, for information to come out. It was time. Anytime there's a free flow of information, it's healthy, rather than the stifling of the information that's taken on so many decades before this. So the information coming out is good, but I think that one of the things that they said that was pro-polygamy was they want to strike down the law against polygamy so that they can preserve the women's rights to choose their own sexual partners. And they want to enforce only when the polygamists exploit women and children. Well, when I read that, I remembered My Favorite Wife. Did you read His Favorite Wife by Susan Schmidt? She was from the LeBaron group. And she tells her story. She was raised in Mexico in the LeBaron group down there. And in her story, she said, the girls got to choose who they would marry. Well, and now this is kind of what they're saying here. The women should have the right to choose. Well, she was able to choose who she would marry. But guess what her choices consisted of? Married men. Mm-hmm. You couldn't choose from single men. You had to choose from these married men. So your choices are really limited anyway.
Yeah, that's what they called the Law of Sarah, where she had a choice of what family she wanted to go in. But if she didn't want to go into any family, or she didn't want to let her husband go into polygamy, why then she became the, what they call it, the villain in the whole thing. And he was free to go ahead and...
So he could go ahead and do it anyway.
Right.
Yeah. The Law of Sarah was just
a farce.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like the whole doctrine is a farce.
The whole Section 132.
Yeah.
Okay, the fourth point. What was presented as against making this a legal statute?
Well, there was a number of things. Where on earth do you start?
That's true.
Of course, the obvious things is that young girls were forced into marriage. They were taken across state line. It was a form of slavery. They had no choice of who they married. There was other abuses. But one thing that I noticed that came out that hasn't come out here locally was the educational aspect. Mm-hmm. And we were talking just before the show went on, started, that there's 2 public schools run by polygamists up there around Bountiful. They get $2 million a year to support the school, but most of the kids drop out, and especially the girls. A lot of them don't even reach age 17 before they're put into a marriage. Their merchandise stuff is what happens, and only, what was it, 12 in 20 years?
20 students in 2 schools in 20 years.
Who actually graduated. And that's not a very good record.
That's 1 student per school per year.
Right.
And $40 million in funds.
Right, and it's my understanding that they are not accredited in any college or university because the education is so inferior. Because a lot of it is spent, the education, in teaching them to obey the prophet and the bishop, and that he takes priority. So what the government is doing, and they've been doing it in the United States as well as in Canada, is subsidizing this religious belief, this religious organization.
Basically. Now, I don't know if you would know the answer to this, but I know down in Colorado City, the FLDS community down there, they wouldn't teach, and even when they were teaching in Alta Academy here in Salt Lake, they wouldn't teach that men landed on the moon. They didn't teach about dinosaurs. They didn't teach just the basics. Yeah. I wonder, do you have any idea if they taught the same way up in the Canadian FLDS group?
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if the FLDS was teaching that there was no such thing as the Holocaust and things of that nature, no dinosaurs. I would suspect that they were teaching it up there also.
So their education couldn't have been accredited if they weren't teaching basic facts.
The kids were lucky if they were able to read and multiply and subtract. It was mostly religion. Even though there was inspectors I read would come and inspect, they didn't really delve into what they were teaching.
And they knew when the inspectors were coming too.
Oh, sure.
The articles I was reading, so there wasn't a surprise anything.
Sure,
about that.
You could always put on a good show.
The part of what was presented as making it against making it legal, there's always more unmarried males than females. Always. The males are forced out of the community, and of course that gives us a whole new area of abuse with these young men, and the females being coerced into marriage. I guess one thing, and I don't really aspire to this whole idea of equality where a woman should take many husbands, but I don't aspire that a man should take many wives either. But I mean, if we're going to go the equality route, what's to say that I can't go out and have a vision and God comes and talks to me in a bunch of trees and tells me the only way I can go to heaven is if I have 6 or 7 husbands?
That's right. That's right. That's polyandry.
And who says that? Who's to say that I didn't really have that vision?
Well, there's a form of polyandry that is practiced, like in the TLC, the True and Living Church out of Manti.
Oh, yeah.
And that is the where a woman, if she decides that her husband isn't going to exalt her, that she can go to another family. And I forget what they call it.
Brigham Young did that.
Oh, yeah. And
he taught it from the pulpit.
That's right. If a man with a greater priesthood could take the wife of a man with a lesser priesthood, because it ensured her exaltation. It never, he was opposed to lust, and he spent a lot of time on the pulpit saying that it wasn't about lust. But you look at polygamy on paper and polygamy how it's practiced, and the lust comes out loud and clear. Back in Brigham Young's time as well as here. There's some church apologists that claimed that polygamy was practiced on a higher plane during Brigham Young's time.
But he didn't read the history, did he?
There are plenty of books that show you that the same disgusting things that go on now went on then. And why shouldn't we? The Y chromosome hasn't changed, nor has the doctrine changed. So if you take those two stimulus, why shouldn't you receive the same results?
Whether it's the same.
300 years from now or now.
Exactly, the same thing. One of the things that came out, as we've already talked about, are these young girls, these very, very, very young girls that were trafficked, 12 and 13 years old. In fact, we had a call last week from a caller. I was talking about Warren Jeff's FLDS last week, and the question is asked frequently that the caller called, what's wrong with the parents that they would allow this to happen to their children? Well, first of all, the mothers, they really don't have a say. They don't. It's a male-dominated society, so the mothers can't say, no, you can't do this. It just doesn't happen. But the mother herself may have been a young bride like that, and the father may himself have already taken young brides like that. So where's
the brainwashing goes on right from birth.
Yeah.
And these women and little girls are raised with the idea that the prophet controls their exaltation and that they must be obedient to the prophet. Otherwise, they won't be exalted. They'll go to damnation. And they are so indoctrinated that if Warren Jeff says, I want your 12-year-old daughter, a mother will take her by the hand and present him to him.
And walk her over to him. And a good part of the time, they are grateful that that daughter is married off to this great priesthood holder.
Yeah, right.
Very sad. It's very sad. It's like the fox guarding the hen house. I mean, what kind of a standard is there? Only the standards that's there.
That's right. I remember years ago, Owen Allred, when he was alive and was the prophet of Apostolic United Brethren, sent a letter to the Attorney General and said that if you'll put me in charge of all the polygamists, I'll make sure it's done right.
I read that, I said no thank you. I'm glad they said no thank you. Jonathan Baker is a lawyer for a group called Real Women of Canada. And he said, it's no exaggeration to say that polygamy is an anti-democratic abomination. And I read in some of Warren Jeff's writing where he wrote in one of his recordings that the priesthood, now the priesthood in the FLDS is everything. It's everything. It owns the property, it owns the people, it owns the children, it owns the homes, it owns the business. It's everything. Warren Jeff said that the priesthood is a benevolent dictatorship. Now, so far I've seen the dictatorship part, but I have not seen the benevolent part in any of the polygamy groups that I've been around.
The benevolence is just one-sided, and that's on the male side.
And usually one or two people sided too, and that's all.
Right, because there's a pecking order, and there's the elite, and then there's the secondary and the inferior families. And it's these poor lost boys in the inferior families that get run out so that there's less competition for the little girls. And then when you have competition like that, the more keen the competition is, the younger they grab the little girls and turn them into wives.
Well, and that's part of what I read last week too, where Warren Jeff says he wanted these young girls before they started to understand life around them, and before they could get into these boy troubles. He said, I will be their boy trouble.
Right. Right. He wants to raise them and mold them into what he wants to be. You know, that's part of the indoctrination. Tom Green, if you remember him, he was the same way, and he would advise people to get them young, then you can raise them the way you want them.
The way you want them to be.
Yeah.
One, I don't remember who it was, but one of the quotes said that in polygamy they devour their young. Or he didn't use
metaphorically,
the word, they do, because they take the young girls before they become people, real people, before they even be able to think for themselves. They kick the young boys out. There's just, they cannibalize their own people.
Right.
It's so sad. We're going to open up the telephones right now. Our phone number is 801-973-TV20, 801-973-8820. We would like to hear from anyone who has any questions or comments about the show. Please stay on topic. Don't call in and ask what Brigham Young did in 1860 or something, because we're not talking about that. Please stay on the topic. And if you have any questions or comments or observations about this court case, we would love to hear from you. One of the things that's come out in this court case that hadn't come out before, and we did part of a show on it, was the infant abuse. And I think Carolyn Jessup was the first one to bring that up.
Yeah, a form of water torture where they break the child from crying. It's terrible what the... I don't whether they're on LSD or drugs or something to come up with stuff like this. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know what they do. It's horrible to even
Here's
think.
another thing that I noticed is that they claimed that Christianity was the state religion. That's one of the arguments that the FLDS had, which I found was interesting because all of the Mormon fundamentalists claim to be Christians. They claim to be as Christian as anyone else, but here they're making drawing the line between them and the Christians, claiming that Christianity is the state religion, which makes me think that they're Mormons. That's different, and I think it is. Mormonism, in the true sense, is different than Christianity.
Oh, yes,
as different as Islam is from Christianity.
Absolutely different than Christianity. But they like to differ with us by saying, "Who are you to define?" Well, I don't define it. The Bible defines what Christianity is. I don't. Right. But if they don't match up with what the Bible defines it to be, how can they? Right. How can they be something that they're not?
Well, Jesus Christ is the one who allegedly gave the plural marriage revelation to Joseph Smith. But if you take the Jesus Christ of section 132 and compare him with the Jesus Christ in the New Testament, there's no congruence whatsoever at all.
No, and we like to bring this up on the show too, where in the Book of Mormon it totally condemns polygamy. It's an abomination. They condemn it. He condemned Solomon and David for their many wives and concubines, and then section 132, he justified Solomon and David for his many wives and concubines. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah. Do the works of Abraham. And man, if you read about Abraham, he took a plural wife and then let his monogamous wife send her out on the desert to die, and he never lifted a hand. And that's how some of these modern polygamists are.
Oh yeah,
there's your program, it says, "What love is this?" There is no love in polygamy.
That's why we named it this, is because there's the love that God has for us is the love that they have is nothing compared to the love God has for us, and a God who loves us that much would never command polygamy.
That's right.
One of the list of harms that polygamy does, it was brought up in the Canadian case. Among the list in one of the articles was early sexualization of girls, increased physical and sexual abuse of women and girls, higher infant mortality rates, shortened female life expectancy, lower educational levels for girls and boys, less equality for women, increased rates of trafficking in women and girls, and that's international border trafficking.
That's right.
There.
That's the white slavery.
Increased likelihood of arranged or forced marriages, decreased civil and political liberties, and increased crime due to higher numbers of unmarried men. And all this has been admitted as evidence in this court case up there in Canada.
Right.
That's a pretty sad list.
It is.
And they want to decriminalize it?
I know. Because this lifestyle, all of these crimes and these abuses and everything emanates from that particular lifestyle. And as proof, back in the 1600s, about the time of Martin Luther, there was a German community of Munster, and not too many people know it, but it's in my latest book that I anyway, there were some Christians that decided that polygamy was the way to go, and they used the Bible, the old patriarchs, as an excuse. And it's interesting that here, like over 600 years before Joseph Smith gets his revelation, the community of Munster had all of the same things, male domination, women had no rights, they were marrying little children as 12 years old. Everything that goes on now went on then. And it evolved because of the polygamy.
Wow. And well, you can parallel a lot of that with Muhammad too.
Oh yeah, Muhammad, his first wife was only 12.
That's right. Okay, looks like we have a couple of calls. We have Bob calling on line 2. Hello, Bob. Hello, Bob.
Yes, hello.
Yes, you're on the air.
Hi, how are you? I was wondering if you see a resurgence of polygamy coming back into the Mormon Church. Thank you. I'll take your comment off the air. Thank you.
Well, I guess you mean the church itself?
You mean the LDS Church or Mormonism in general?
He hung up.
Okay. Well, it's not coming back into the LDS Church. If they get any type of an inkling that you're practicing or even believing in it, why they'll excommunicate you.
Yeah, they'll do that. A lot of the questions we get, and of course we can't answer it, but what would the Mormon Church do if polygamy was legalized? You know, like they're doing it, trying to do up there, what would the church do?
I think that the women in the church have much more power now than they used to in the 19th century, and I think that they would rebel. I personally think they'd rebel.
Let's hope. Okay, line 1, we have Karen calling. Hello, Karen.
Yes.
Yes, you're on the air. What's your question?
Well, in the first place, I was a member of the LDS Church, and if people think that there is not polygamy going on within the LDS Church, they are so wrong, it's not even funny. I witnessed it, I know it, and they just would not admit it if they were held under hot lights and had their fingernails being pulled out from underneath them.
Now, are you saying...
I would much rather live in a polygamist family as opposed to the other situation, because when your husband... I would rather know the women that my husband is sleeping with. At least I'm not going to get a disease from the other women that my husband's associating with and supposedly is married to, as opposed to living with him in a supposed monogamous relationship, and he goes out on his business trips and he sleeps with every woman that is not nailed down. Let me tell you what, that is not only degrading, but it's absolutely
now let me
frightening,
excuse me
these days.
Okay, now let me interrupt you here right now. Okay, we're getting a little bit off track of what our focus for the show is tonight, but I do have one short question for you. Did you say that polygamy is active within the Mormon Church right now? Is that what you said?
Yes, it is. I witnessed it. I might know it.
Okay, maybe it's promiscuity that she's talking
And
about.
anybody that says that that's not true does not know what they're talking about.
Okay, well, it would be interesting if you wanted to email some information that would verify what you said, but, you know, people can say anything, and the Mormon Church promises they will excommunicate anybody who does. So we want to thank you for a call.
Well,
okay, we have line 3, Ronnie in West Jordan. Hello, Ronnie. Yes, you're on the air. You can turn down your TV.
Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. What's your question?
What do you believe in? Are you a Christian?
Yes, sir. But what is your question for our topic
Well,
tonight?
my question is, I like what Mr. Llewellyn is doing. It's mostly like history. But I've been watching your show so many times. You're always talking about these other churches, not Catholic, not Methodist.
Sir, we're talking about the FLDS polygamous community in Bountiful, Canada tonight. Do you have a question or comment that you'd like to say about that?
I'd rather have to see her preach the gospel that she's believing in. So that
Sir, I'm going to give you one more chance. Stay on topic. Tonight we're talking about the FLDS polygamy community in Bountiful, Canada. They're trying to make polygamy legal.
After this, the polygamist. Why can't she talk about the Bible, something goodness for the other people?
You don't have a question for our topic tonight. Is that your answer?
No, I'd rather have her teach the Bible instead of accusing other people.
Well, quite frequently I go to the Bible and talk a lot about it, but since you're off topic, we're going to have to disconnect you and maybe...
Well, that's the way she is.
Are you talking about me?
Mr. Llewellyn is talking about history.
We're talking about polygamy, so you can call in some other night when we're talking about a specific thing in the Bible, okay? Thanks for calling. Good night. Okay, on topic. Please call. We'd love to have your calls. We'd love to have your opinions about the FLDS polygamy Canadian court case. Please stay on topic. Did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I'm just going to say that all of the people associated with your program here come from various Christian religions, not just one single religion. And you even invite skeptics like me in. So,
well, you can't please all the people all the time, can you? Okay, let's go to the next question. They've presented the evidence. They've done the pro, the con. A lot of new developments have come out. All the 31 girls, they say now, that they discovered that they trafficked across the borders.
Yeah. Well, you know, and I think it's commendable that Texas and Canada are exchanging information and documentation because it brings it out. I think that this is, commend Canada for what they're doing because they bring out the pros and the cons, and let's hear both sides of it. And then another thing is the FLDS say that individual rights should trump societal rights. Of course, I don't believe that. When individual rights interfere with the community and cause disorder and harm individuals within the society, then it should not trump it. But they're taking the position that individual rights should trump societal rights, and that's just not. You can't have an orderly society that way. No,
you absolutely can't. And again, it's like you said, anybody can go up and start any religion, just put the name Jesus in it and start a religion and have all kinds of odd behavior.
That's right. And these cults do that too. I mean, there's enough problems with the various cults that come and go like pimples without legalizing something that is so hurtful and demoralizing.
And it is hurtful to the children, hurtful to the girls, hurtful to the women, hurtful to the young boys. It is very. In the Reynolds versus, and Canada used this as their example, and I'm sure they're going to keep it before them as they make their choice up there. But the Reynolds versus the United States, when it was taken to the Supreme Court in 1879. George Reynolds, who was a polygamist,
That's right.
by Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball, wanted to test.
That's right.
So they used him as a guinea pig.
That's right.
And he went to court and he was fined $500 and found guilty, fined $500 and 2 years in jail. So he took it to the Supreme Court.
Right.
And this is where it talks about what trumps what? Individual religious rights, does it trump? And the Supreme Court said, polygamy has always been odious among the northern and western nations of Europe, and until the establishment of the Mormon Church, now this is what the Supreme Court said, until the establishment of the Mormon Church, polygamy was almost exclusively a feature of the life of Asiatic and African people. The second marriage was always void. From the earliest history of England, polygamy has been treated as an offense against society. In the face of all this evidence, it's impossible to believe that the constitutional guarantee of religious freedom was intended to prohibit legislation in respect to this most important feature of social life. Marriage is, in its very nature, is a sacred obligation, is nevertheless the most civilized in the nation as civil contract and regulated by law. The court determined that we do have the right in this country to our religious beliefs, the freedom to believe however we want, but we do not have the freedom to behave however we want in religion.
You can go ahead and believe it if you want, but you can't practice it because it's against the law.
Right.
That's essentially what they said. But yet there are prosecutors here in the state of Utah that are afraid that because of Lawrence versus Texas, the homosexuals and same-sex marriage, the issue of privacy might overturn the Reynolds decision.
They are afraid of that.
But
yes.
man, when you read it, it makes sense. It's to me, it's as good today as it was back then.
Well, it should be. Why should we lower our standards? Why should we lower the standards of the country to conform to people's beliefs?
Yeah, their selfish instincts is what it amounts to.
Right, and just because Joseph Smith said God told him to.
Yeah, well, you know, anybody can claim that.
That's exactly right, and they do. All right, let's go to line 3. Ian calling from St. George. Hello, Ian.
Hello, how are you?
We are good, thank you. You're on the air. What's your question?
Well, I live here in St. George, and I'm wondering, I've heard a lot of rumors about the FLDS Church as far as infanticide is concerned, and that if they have children, probably not all of them, but many of them have the option that if they have a child, like, say, is born with Down syndrome or some other deformity or something like that, that they actually kill the child. And I don't know if that's a rumor or not. I don't know if it's a rumor for sure, but I don't know if it's a true rumor or what. I was hoping you could shed some light on it.
Do you have any?
Well, you hear rumors like that, not only with the FLDS, but with the Kingstons. There's supposed to be a cemetery where deformed children or inferior infants have been buried. But because of the incest, there has been a lot of defects of children, and it's well documented. I forget the newspaper. It's been several years ago, but there was a great big article about the different defects as a result of incest in the FLDS around Colorado City. And then there was another article also about the different defects of children due to incest among the Kingstons. I believe they have their own cemeteries, but there's no real documentary factual evidence that they are murdering deformed children.
Yeah, I haven't. I don't think there is anything.
That might be a stretch.
Yeah.
So you'd say that's not true, huh?
Well, there's just no evidence of it. Let's put it that way.
Okay. And then you were saying something about what they did to children as far as breaking, crying, or something like that. What was that about?
Oh, okay. Carolyn Jessup, who escaped from the FLDS, testified in Canada that her husband would take infants and use a type of water torture to break them from crying, to make them be obedient. You can read her affidavit on the internet and read it for yourself.
Was like waterboarding
Yeah, similar to
something like that.
waterboarding, water torture, where they had drops of water on it until it just became exhausted and totally compliant.
Oh.
Even a 30-day-old child.
Yeah, I saw that happen in my home. I saw my dad do that.
Is
to
that
one of
right? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your ministry. God bless.
Thank you. Thanks for calling. Okay, line 2, Anonymous. Oh my. Hello, Anonymous.
Yes, Doris, about 10 minutes ago, you two were talking about how the way they would get a baby to stop crying was some kind of water method. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if you would elaborate on that.
We just did, actually. Mr. Llewellyn just answered a question where he did talk about what they did in that water torture. So maybe you missed that since you were on the line. What they would do is they'd take children and they would hold them under the water until they would quit crying. And then when they would pull them out from under the water, the child would be so scared they would start to cry again when it caught its breath, and then put it back under the water and until it would quit crying again. And they would do that over and over and over again until the baby was so exhausted that it would almost just faint from exhaustion. The FLDS has done that. I know the Kingston group has done it. I saw it done to one of my siblings when I was in my home.
Yeah, I might be able to find
Carolyn
it.
Jessup, if you wanted to Google the FLDS court case in Bountiful, Carolyn Jessup gave a testimony where she documented that. It's also in her book, Escape.
Yeah, here it is right here. Then they hold the baby's face up under cold running water for 30 seconds, and as soon as it gets its breath and starts crying, they spank it again. A session like that could last an hour until the baby quits fighting from fatigue. This can happen frequently until the parent feels the baby is sufficiently broken. So this is verbatim from her testimony.
Mm-hmm. Does that answer you?
I can't even believe it. I'm speechless.
Well, it should make you speechless. It should make any of us speechless that they would do that.
This is the type of thing that evolves out of this type of a lifestyle.
It's abusive. Abusive to infants, children, little girls, little boys, women. It's abusive lifestyle.
Well, Doris, if you wouldn't mind, my ex-husband, he has won custody of my children, and I married him after he got off his mission, and we, of course, he's my ex-husband now, but he won custody of my children, and he's abused them. And the last thing my son told me is that their dad throws them in a cold shower to punish them. I know that's not as extreme, but I don't know what's happened in the past.
Well, can't you report this to law enforcement?
Yeah.
I have. No one wants to listen.
How old's your son?
I have 7 kids, and he won custody of them.
Well, you should be able to go to the Division of Family Services and get some kind of help from them and report it. They have to investigate every report of abuse. They have to.
Did you say DCFS?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Report it.
I have reported it to them, and they haven't done anything.
They have to.
They have investigated, but my kids won't. They said they don't see anything.
Well, out of fear, that's possible. That happens in polygamy groups all the time. They won't speak. The victim will never speak, so therefore they can't have a case because the victim won't come forward.
Well, if you would just keep us in your prayers, I would appreciate that.
Okay. I will do that. And
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you for calling in. Christians who are watching the show, you might pray for this woman and pray that God would intervene in this. An off-the-air question, would the Canada ruling affect the laws here? Not yet.
No, but it'll have an impact.
Yeah.
It can't help but not have an impact. The trouble is if the Judge Bauman, decides to keep the bigamy statute, it'll be appealed to the a higher Supreme Court in the eastern part of Canada.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So it
and
might
then
be a year or two before it's all really
it
settled.
would still, yeah, it would go to the higher court, and then it would go to the people of Canada. The last article I read, it would go to the society, and then it would go to Parliament. So it's still got a few steps to go yet after he makes his decision, if he decided it would be.
Right. But even if his decision is favorable, it'll still have an impact here in the United States.
It will.
Well, we needed some good old Texas justice. You know,
Do you think they'd come up here?
I like the way those what is the law enforcement down the Texas Rangers? I like the way they operate down there.
Yeah, they do. Well, we've come to the end of the show. Another show again. Thanks again for coming. Appreciate your information and coming and sharing with us, and thank you for watching. We do appreciate the callers who've called in, and for the young lady who prayed about your children, we will be praying for you. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 48, Jesus said, "Be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." Now, the wording in the Bible is extremely important. The passage says, be perfect. Notice that Jesus didn't say become perfect. And there's a huge difference between the two concepts. Another important point is that our perfection is to be equal to the perfection of God. Is that possible? Now, many people say that God never commands us to do something that we can't do. Therefore, they say it is possible to be perfect. But they're not listening to the whole Bible when they say that. Romans 3:23 says that all of us have sinned and all of us has fallen short of the glory of God. Now, if we have all sinned and none of us can never be as perfect as God, because God has never sinned and we have. Being perfect and becoming perfect are not the same. Becoming perfect is ongoing effort of trying to keep God's law or depending upon our own good works. But Hebrews chapter 10 verse 1 tells us that the law makes nothing perfect. Philippians 3:9 tells us that we cannot achieve our own righteousness by keeping God's law. The only righteousness that pleases God is His own perfect righteousness. The amazing thing is that God will give us His own righteousness as a gift if we will throw out all of our attempts to do good works, which is called self-righteousness, and trust in Jesus Christ alone. Then God sees us as perfect in Christ Jesus, and that's good news. Now, the word gospel means good news, and you can't get better news than that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. Good night.